I always thought the worst kind of betrayal was cheating, but I was wrong. The worst betrayal is when the person you built a life with tries to take that life away piece by piece, and smiles while doing it. My wife didn't just want to leave me. She wanted to destroy me, take my home, my pride, everything I had ever worked for. That night, when I found the papers she'd forged, my heart didn't just break. It burned. And as I stood in the empty living room, stripped of everything, I whispered to myself one promise. She may take me down, but I'll make sure she loses it all. The first time I noticed something was wrong, it wasn't with shouting, or fighting, or even silence. It was with a smile. My wife, Claire, had this way of smiling when she thought no one was watching. Lips pursed, eyes cold. The kind of smile that said she was winning at a game I didn't even know I was playing. We'd been married nearly 25 years. Our house wasn't some mansion, but it was mine. Every nail, every brick, every piece of wood had a memory. I'd built the porch myself in the summer of '99, sweat dripping down my face while she brought me lemonade. I'd painted the walls in the living room the year our son left for college, trying to keep the place bright even as the house grew quieter. This wasn't just a house. It was my blood, my years, my anchor, but to her it was something else. It was leverage. Claire had always been ambitious. Too ambitious. When we first met, I admired that fire in her, the way she refused to settle for less. But over time, that fire turned into greed. She wasn't satisfied with what we had. She wanted more. The newest car, the fanciest clothes, vacations we couldn't afford. I worked double shifts, skipped nights out with friends, and she still looked at me like I wasn't enough. One evening I came home later than usual. Work had been a mess, deadlines piling on top of each other, and I wanted nothing more than to sit on the porch with a cold beer. As I walked through the front door, I heard Claire on the phone. Her voice was low, sharp, but filled with a sweetness she never used with me anymore. I froze just outside the kitchen, listening. "Yes, it's almost done," she whispered. "Once the papers are finalized, the house will be in my name. He won't see it coming." I nearly dropped the keys in my hand. My heart slammed against my ribs, but I forced myself to stay still, breathing quietly. My name, my house. She was planning something. Something legal. Something permanent. I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I slipped upstairs, my hands shaking, my head spinning with questions. I couldn't believe it. Divorce? Fine. Affairs? Maybe. But to steal my house, the place I had built with my own two hands, that was war. The next morning I woke up early and went to the study where we kept all our important files. Claire was still asleep, so I rifled through the drawers carefully. That's when I found them. Manila folders neatly stacked, papers clipped together, her handwriting scrawled across sticky notes. My eyes landed on the top page and my stomach dropped. It was a transfer of property deed, my house signed over, not to her, but to some LLC I didn't recognize. And at the bottom in black ink was my signature, except I had never signed it. I held the paper up to the light. The signature was close, almost perfect, but I knew my own hand. She had forged it. I sat there staring at that paper, my pulse pounding so hard I could barely hear. In that moment 1,000 memories flashed before me. The weekends I'd spent sanding floorboards, the Christmas mornings by the fireplace, the way our dog used to run circles around the backyard. She wanted to erase all of it. She wanted to erase me. I slipped the papers back into the folder, careful not to leave a trace. I needed to know more before I made a move. Over the next week I watched her carefully. She was colder, sharper, but always smiling, always planning. She spent more time out of the house claiming errands or lunches with friends, but I knew better. Every time she left, I checked her study, finding more documents. Fake bank statements, lawyer letters, drafts of divorce papers that painted me as some violent drunk I had never been. She was building a case brick by brick to take me down and take the house with her. But here's the thing about Claire. She underestimated me. She thought I'd fold, like a weak man who couldn't live without her. She forgot who I was. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. I came home to find boxes stacked in the hallway. My boxes? She'd pulled my clothes from the closet, folded them neatly, too neatly, and left them by the door like I was some tenant whose lease had run out. She sat at the kitchen table, sipping wine, her eyes sparkling with that same cold smile. "It's better this way," she said, her tone calm, almost rehearsed. "You don't have to make this ugly. Just sign the papers and I'll let you keep your truck." My truck. As if that was some gift. My fists clenched at my sides. I didn't answer her. I walked past her, grabbed the boxes, and carried them to the porch. But inside I wasn't leaving. Not for good. That night, while she slept, I called an old friend, a lawyer who owed me a favor. I told him everything, every detail, every document. His voice was sharp, serious, but steady. "Don't worry," he said. "We'll catch her. Just play along. Let her think she's winning." And so I did. I let her pack my life into boxes. I let her smile at me like a predator circling prey. I let her believe she had already won. But deep inside, the fire was burning hotter than ever. She thought she could take my house. She thought she could erase me. She was wrong. This was just the beginning. The weeks that followed felt like walking through a storm blindfolded. Claire moved with precision as if she'd been rehearsing this betrayal for years. Every word she spoke dripped with false kindness, every gesture carefully staged to look like she was the victim and I was the aggressor. At first I thought she was bluffing, that maybe she was trying to scare me into leaving quietly so she could keep the house without a fight. But then the letters started arriving. The first one was from a law firm I'd never heard of, stuffed in a crisp white envelope that smelled faintly of her perfume. I opened it at the kitchen table, my hands trembling. The words blurred together in a haze of legal jargon, but the meaning was clear. She was filing for divorce on grounds of emotional neglect and financial irresponsibility. Lies, every single word. I read it twice, then a third time, feeling the weight of it settle on my chest. She wasn't bluffing. She was going to war. The second letter hit even harder. It was from the bank, a foreclosure notice. Apparently I had missed 3 mortgage payments in a row. Except I hadn't. I had the receipts, the proof, the canceled checks, but the account numbers on the letter didn't match mine. She had rerouted the payments, made it look like I was defaulting. I slammed the letter down so hard the table shook. My house, my name, my record. She was dragging it all through the mud. I confronted her that night. She was sitting in the living room, her legs crossed neatly, glass of wine in her hand, watching some soap opera with a look of bored amusement. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice low, trembling with barely contained rage. She didn't even flinch. She took a slow sip, set the glass down, and turned to me with that same cold smile. "Because I can," she said simply. "Because you're too stubborn to see what I deserve. You think this house is yours. It's ours, and soon it'll just be mine." Her calmness cut deeper than any scream could have. I wanted to shout, to shake her, to make her see reason. But deep down I knew she didn't care. She didn't want reason. She wanted victory. The days bled into each other after that. I was served papers left and right. restraining orders I didn't deserve, financial claims that made me out to be reckless, even character statements from neighbors who swore they'd seen me yelling at her. Lies she'd planted, rehearsed, manipulated, and the worst part, people believed her. Friends I'd known for years stopped calling. Co-workers looked at me differently, like I was some kind of monster hiding behind a friendly smile. Even my own son, Michael, kept his distance. "Dad," he said on the phone one night, "I don't know what's going on, but Mom sounds really scared. You should just maybe leave her the house. Walk away from everything I'd built, everything I'd worked for, from the only home my son had ever known." The thought hollowed me out. One evening I came home to find the locks changed. My key scraped uselessly against the metal. Through the window I saw my furniture, my recliner, my bookshelf, even the old rug I'd bought on clearance, all pushed into the corner like leftovers. She'd moved her things into the center of the room, as if she'd already won. Rain was pouring down that night. I sat on the porch steps, drenched, clutching the useless key in my fist until it dug into my skin. I could feel the weight of the world pressing down on me, the humiliation of being cast out of my own home while she sat inside, warm and dry. For the first time in years I cried. Not quiet tears, but gut-wrenching sobs that echoed in the rain. Everything I was, everything I had fought for, was slipping away, and she was watching. I knew she was watching from behind those curtains, savoring every second of my downfall. The next day, I stayed at a cheap motel off the highway, the kind of place where the walls are thin and the air smells like cigarettes no matter how many times they've been scrubbed. I lay on the lumpy bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if maybe she was right. Maybe I should just give up. Maybe the house wasn't worth it. Maybe I wasn't worth it, but then I remembered the papers, the forged signatures, the bank statements that didn't add up, the smug look on her face when she said, "Because I can." That's when the fire came back. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer friend again. I told him everything, the foreclosure notices, the forged deeds, the restraining orders. He listened patiently, then said something that made my pulse quicken. "She's sloppy. People who think they're untouchable always are. If we dig deep enough, we'll find something." For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. I started documenting everything. Every letter, every phone call, every text. I made copies of documents, photographed signatures, even recorded conversations when I could. I became obsessed, driven by something stronger than anger, survival. And slowly, piece by piece, I began to see the cracks in her perfect story. A date that didn't line up, a signature that leaned the wrong way, a payment missed on a day I had a stamped receipt in my wallet. She was clever, yes, but she wasn't perfect. Still, she wasn't finished with me. Not yet. One night I came back to the motel to find a note slipped under the door. No envelope. Just a folded piece of paper with 3 words scrawled in her handwriting. "You can't win." I stared at those words for a long time, my hands shaking, my teeth grinding. She thought she had me beaten. She thought she had me crawling in the dirt, broken and powerless. But what she didn't know, what she would never understand, was that a man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous kind of man. The note she slipped under my door burned a hole in my mind. "You can't win." She had written it with such confidence, such arrogance, that for a moment I almost believed her. Almost. But as I sat there in that dingy motel room, staring at the cracked ceiling, something shifted inside me. I wasn't going to let her take everything. No. If she wanted a war, I'd give her one. The first thing I did was revisit the paperwork. I spread everything across the motel desk. Foreclosure letters, fake deeds, bank notices, even the divorce filings. The stack was thick, the ink smudged in places, but when I looked at it all together, I started seeing patterns. Dates that didn't make sense. Documents that had been signed on weekends when banks were closed. Signatures that leaned left when mine always leaned right. Claire thought she was clever, but she wasn't as precise as she believed. I circled inconsistencies with a red pen, filling page after page with notes. My lawyer friend David stopped by the motel that night, his briefcase bulging with files. He sat across from me, his glasses low on his nose, and studied my evidence. "Sloppy," he muttered, shaking his head. "She rushed some of this. That's good for us. Those words lit something in me. For weeks I had been alone, drowning in her lies. But now it wasn't just me against her. I had an ally. We spent hours going over everything, cross-referencing bank statements, comparing handwriting samples, even digging into property records online. That's when David found it, the LLC she'd tried to transfer the house into. On paper, it looked legitimate, but when we traced the owner, it wasn't some faceless investor. It was Claire herself under a different name. She had created a shell company to steal the house right out from under me. David leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. "She's cooked. If we can prove this in court, not only does she lose the house, she could face charges for fraud." For the first time in months, I felt my chest lighten. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was fighting back. The next few weeks were a blur of strategy. David advised me to keep playing the role she expected. Beaten, quiet, ready to surrender. Let her believe she had already won. That way she'd get careless. And she did. She paraded around town, telling anyone who would listen that soon the house would be hers alone. She told neighbors I was unstable, dangerous, a man unfit to keep a roof over his head. Some believed her. But others, old friends, people who had known me for years, started to notice the cracks. They saw the way her story changed, the way her smile never reached her eyes. And slowly, whispers started spreading. One night I caught a break I never expected. I was sitting in my truck outside the house watching from the shadows when I saw a light flick on in the study. Claire was inside on the phone. I rolled down the window, just enough to hear her voice. "Yes, the documents are ready," she said, pacing the room. "He's too stupid to figure it out. Once the court date comes, it'll all be mine. Don't worry, I've got backup copies hidden. Backup copies." My pulse quickened. If I could get my hands on those, I'd have everything I needed. The next day, while she was out, meeting a friend, I slipped into the house. My key didn't work anymore, but the back window in the laundry room had always had a faulty latch. I forced it open and climbed inside, careful not to make a sound. The house smelled different now, her perfume everywhere, mixed with the faint scent of wine. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like enemy territory. I went straight to the study. The desk drawers were locked, but I knew Claire's habits. She never went anywhere without her vanity kit. Sure enough, when I checked, there was a small key taped under the drawer, hidden beneath a layer of velvet. I opened the drawer, and there they were, stacks of documents, neatly bound with sticky notes in her sharp handwriting, forged bank slips, fake receipts, property transfers, even drafts of statements she planned to use in court, painting me as abusive and violent. My hands shook as I snapped photos of every page with my phone. I didn't take the originals, not yet. If she realized they were gone, she'd tighten her grip. I needed her to think everything was still under control. When I climbed back out of that window, heart pounding, I knew the tide was turning. She wasn't the only one with secrets anymore. The following weeks, David and I built our case quietly. He pulled in handwriting experts, financial auditors, even a private investigator. Each one came back with the same conclusion: forgery, fraud, manipulation. Claire had built her entire case on lies, and we were going to expose every single one. But the hardest part was waiting. I had to see her day after day, smug and confident, acting like she had already buried me. She showed up at the motel once, uninvited, just to smirk at the peeling wallpaper and say, "You should get used to this. It's all you'll have soon." I didn't react. I just nodded, let her think she was right. But inside I was boiling. Inside, I was counting the days. Finally, the court date arrived. I walked into that courtroom wearing my best suit, shoulders squared, jaw tight. Claire was already there, dressed like a widow in black, her eyes shimmering with fake tears. She looked at me with pity, shaking her head as if I was already lost. But I wasn't lost. Not anymore. As the judge called the case to order, Claire's lawyer strutted forward with confidence, presenting her mountain of forged documents like they were gospel. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, painting herself as the victim of an uncaring husband. The audience murmured sympathetically, and then it was our turn. David stood tall, his voice sharp as a blade. One by one, he shredded her case. He presented the real bank records, the real mortgage receipts, the proof of her shell company. He called the handwriting expert, who testified under oath that my signature had been forged. He introduced the investigator, who revealed the LLC's owner, Claire herself, hiding behind a false name. Each revelation hit like a hammer. Claire's confident smile faltered, then cracked. Her hands fidgeted in her lap. Her eyes darted back and forth, searching for an escape. By the time David finished, the room was silent. The judge leaned forward, his expression dark. "Mrs. Anderson," he said slowly, "it appears you have not only attempted to defraud this court, but also to illegally transfer property that does not belong to you. This is a serious matter." Claire's face went pale. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Real fear. I sat back in my chair, my heart pounding with triumph. I wasn't finished with her, not yet. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't losing anymore. I was winning, and she knew it. The silence in that courtroom felt heavier than any prison cell. I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights above, the shuffle of papers, even the nervous tapping of Claire's perfectly manicured nails against the wooden table. For the first time she looked small. Not powerful, not untouchable, small. The judge's gavel cracked against the bench, sharp as thunder. "Mrs. Anderson, this court is adjourned for 30 minutes. When we reconvene, you will answer for these charges." The bailiff's voice boomed. "All rise." And everyone stood. Claire tried to do the same graceful walk she always did, chin up, shoulders back, like she was still in control. But her knees wobbled. Her eyes darted everywhere, searching for sympathy, an ally, a lifeline. There were none. I stayed in my seat a moment longer, watching her sink into the hallway crowd. People she once charmed now avoided her gaze. Some whispered behind their hands. For years she had spun her stories and worn her mask so well, but now the cracks were wide open for everyone to see. David leaned toward me, his voice low. "She's cornered. By the time we're done, she'll be stripped bare." I nodded, gripping the edge of the table. "Not just stripped," I whispered. "Destroyed." The recess gave me time to breathe, to let the weight of everything settle. For months I had been buried under her lies, suffocated by the idea that she would win. But here I was, standing in the rubble of her empire, watching it crumble. When court resumed, the hammer came down. David presented the photographs I'd taken of the hidden documents. He walked the judge through each forgery, each fraudulent transfer, each lie Claire had tried to weave. She squirmed in her chair, her lawyer sweating bullets beside her, flipping through papers he could no longer defend. The judge's voice was steady, final. This court finds that Mrs. Anderson engaged in fraudulent behavior with the intent to unlawfully seize property. The deeds are null and void. The house remains the property of Mr. Anderson. My breath caught. I hadn't realized until that moment how badly I needed to hear those words. My house remains mine, but the judge wasn't done. In addition, he continued, his tone colder now, this matter will be referred to the district attorney for further investigation into criminal fraud. Claire's face collapsed. Her lips trembled. Her eyes glistened with the tears she had always faked so well. But this time they were real. Fear soaked her features. She whispered something to her lawyer, who shook his head, his jaw tight with frustration. I sat there and watched her drown in the silence she once used as a weapon against me. When the gavel struck again, ending the hearing, I stood tall. People were watching. Neighbors, acquaintances, even strangers who had come to witness the spectacle. They saw me reclaim my dignity, my truth, and they saw her unravel. Claire stumbled toward me in the hallway, her voice breaking. "Please," she whispered, clutching my sleeve. "Don't let them take everything. I didn't mean for it to go this far." Her perfume, once intoxicating, now smelled rotten. I pulled my arm away. "You meant every step, Claire. You buried me alive and smiled while you did it. Now it's your turn to feel the dirt closing in." Her mouth opened, but no words came. For the first time in our marriage, she had nothing left to say. Within weeks, the consequences began to unfold. Her accounts were frozen. Creditors came knocking, dragging her name through mud she could no longer charm her way out of. The so-called friends who had laughed at her dinner parties disappeared one by one. The mask was gone, and all that remained was a woman stripped bare of her lies. And me, I went home. The first night I stepped back into my house, it didn't feel like mine yet. The air was heavy with her ghost, her photographs still framed on the walls, her laughter echoing in the rooms. But I walked through every inch of it. The kitchen where she used to cook with poisoned sweetness, the living room where she staged her smiles, the study where she plotted to steal it all. And I said out loud to the empty walls, "This is mine again. You can't take it from me." It took weeks to clear her presence. I boxed up her things and left them at a shelter. I repainted walls, opened windows, let fresh air seep into the cracks she had left behind. Slowly the house began to breathe again. And so did I, but I wasn't done. Not yet. The DA pursued the case. Fraud, perjury, forgery. The charges stacked higher than the lies she'd told. I didn't need revenge handed to me. The system she tried to manipulate became the very weapon that cut her down. The day she was sentenced, I went to the courthouse not to gloat, but to witness. She stood there in the same black dress she had worn during our first hearing, but it hung looser now, as if the fabric itself had given up on her. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes sunken. The judge's words rang clear. "Probation denied. You will serve 3 years, and upon release you will carry the financial burden of restitution." Claire sobbed, real broken sobs. She looked at me, desperate, pleading, but I only stared back. I didn't smile, didn't jeer. I just looked, because there was nothing left between us but ashes. And when she was led away in handcuffs, head bowed, I felt no pity. Only freedom. Months passed. I rebuilt my life brick by brick. The house became my sanctuary again, not a battlefield. I planted flowers in the garden, repaired the fence, even repainted the porch swing where we once sat, pretending to be in love. But this time I did it for me, not for her. The whispers in town changed. I wasn't the broken man hiding in a motel anymore. I was the man who survived betrayal, the man who turned the tables. And people respected that. One evening I heard a rumor. Claire had been released early on probation, penniless and alone. No home, no friends, no allies. She wandered from couch to couch begging for shelter, her name a stain that nobody wanted near. The woman who tried to steal my house now had none of her own. Fate had a sense of humor. I never saw her again. But sometimes, late at night, I'd sit on my porch, watching the lights flicker across the neighborhood, and wonder if she ever walked past in the shadows, staring at the house that could have been hers. Did she hate me? Did she envy me? Or did she finally realize that greed had been her own undoing? I'll never know. What I do know is this: she tried to bury me, but I crawled out. She tried to take my home, but she ended up homeless. And I'm still standing, stronger, wiser, untouchable. The war was over, and I had won.